Your sensors are correct. Do not adjust your heading. You've discovered the Omega Particle, streaming to the Alpha Quadrant and beyond. Here's your host, the anchorman of the Federation, the Doctor of Dilithium. This is Jonathan Wiegand.
Welcome back to the Omega Particle Podcast. I am your gracious and humble host, Jonathan Wiegand. We are boldly going where we have never gone before. We are going to be covering a prophetic, maybe I'd say the most prophetic, most chilling episodes of Deep Space Nine, maybe of all of Star Trek. And that is the two-part episode, Past Tense. And buckle up, everybody. It's going to be an interesting show. That's all I'm going to say. So today is the day, according to Star Trek lore, Sisko, Bashir, and Dax got in a transport accident, come back in time. They're in the San Francisco right now as we speak and about to start the Bell Riots. And if you haven't revisited this episode recently, it might be in for a shock. This story and these episodes first aired in 1995, and they eerily mirror the crises, especially one crisis that we're still facing in 2024. Grab your tricorders because it's going to be a very in-depth, kind of more of a modern-day political, I would say, review, of what was predicted 30 years ago. I guess it was almost, it's close to 30 years. It was in 95, so it's almost 30 years. 29, 30-year-old episodes. The crisis we're still grappling with today. Again, just to kind of preface so everybody understands, this is not an episode review of the past tense Bell Riot episodes. We're going to be exploring that later on. We're doing a DS9 review. I just was like, okay, this is too good to pass up. DS9 is my favorite Star Trek. I was like, I have to cover the Bell Riots, but being the anchorman of the Federation, the Doctor of Dilithium, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I didn't want to do just a normal run-of-the-mill episode review for this. I wanted to kind of make it a little bit more real, something you could think about and chew on, and what was the episode really trying to convey. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. I've said this a million times on the podcast, the best science fiction are the stories that help shed light on our real world situations, and they're the allegories. Star Trek is a master class of that. It's been doing it for 50 plus years, all the way back to the original series. So when people say Star Trek's never been political, I'm like, yes, it has. Whether you're conservative, liberal, whatever, it's always been speaking truth to power, showing those allegories. It's one of the more serious subject matters we've ever had on the show, but I'm not afraid to go there. I'm not going to be deep diving too much in the actual policies and things like that, but you'll see what I'm talking about, because I know a lot of us use Trek as escapism, get out of the real world, but the time is right. This is such a stars align, perfect time, perfect scenario to do that. Before we get into the meat of the episode, I want to pass this along just a couple more times and let everybody know. The Star Trek new Bayo watches are out. They are spectacular. They're brilliant. You can use the code OPP50. So that is letter O, PP 50, and get 50% off on those watches. They're great watches. Check them out. There's going to be a link in the episode descriptions wherever you're listening. Also, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Helps us out so much. Helps get us McDonald's for the crew, and get us Starbucks coffee, especially now that it's PSL season again. Thank you, guys. But without further ado, Luna, let's hit it. It's tempting to view fictional stories set far in the future, as visions, whether it's dystopian or otherwise, of what might come to be. But the most successful work are the ones that are able to survive and reach new audiences, even though those predictions have gone untrue. For example, the Perpetual War of 1984 by George Orwell never came to pass in 1984, nor did the interplanetary travel in 2001: A Space Odyssey existed by the new millennium in 2000. So none of that happened. Nonetheless, these stories remain super relevant decades on after their predictive dates because they're broader insights on the themes that they represent. Everything from authoritarianism all the way to human evolution. Star Trek has had 11 television series and 13 films, and it's gone across 7 decades. Star Trek has predicted several events on its own timeline, and a lot of them have proven to be untrue. The original 1960s series, they predicted Khan was going to introduce this eugenics war in the 1990s, and it would ban human engineering, and we would not have, it'd be a huge step in human evolution, but also in our road down to eventual peace in the Federation. And that never came to be. Even so, there's later installments of Star Trek have predicted more tough times ahead, a World War III that's scheduled to begin in 2026, followed by this era of post-atomic dystopian future. And that's supposed to last until Zefram Cochrane has first contact with Vulcan. So it's not really a super uplifting timeline for humanity. And if you're thinking, wait, Jonathan, I thought Trek was supposed to be the sci-fi series that quote-unquote finally got it right, that humans finally figured it out. We finally solved all of these issues. And I have to say that these forecasts of doom are key to the franchise's backstory, stretching out humanity's difficult road to the idealistic paradise of the 23rd and 24th centuries, where, of course, we all know Star Trek is primarily set. Even though these predicted events seem overblown, they do speak to a truth which may account for the franchise's enduring appeal, that suffering through grave mistakes can eventually lead humanity, or an individual, to a more peaceful future. According to Deep Space Nine, one of humanity's worst mistakes came in 2024. But unlike Star Trek's other predictions of global disaster or eugenics wars, this mistake exists at a more relatable level. And as we sit here on the first day of the Bell Riots, August 30th, 2024, it remains a challenge that is just as urgent as when the original episodes aired in 1995. And the challenge in question is homelessness, the unhoused, however you want to say it, and humanity's mistake in hiding the problem rather than solving the problem. The issue is addressed, like I mentioned before, back in January 1995. And just a recap of the episode if you've never seen it, or if it's been a couple years, this installment sees Commander Sisko and Jadzia Dax and Julian Bashir accidentally get transported back in time from their 24th century starship to San Francisco in 2024, August 30th today. As they're waking up from the unconsciousness that happened because of the time travel, Sisko and Bashir are mistakenly identified as homeless people from the unarmed officers. And he even says, there's a law against sleeping in the street. And Bashir and Sisko are like super confused, like, what the heck are you talking about? These aren't pajamas, they're uniforms. Sisko and Bashir are escorted to a walled-off section of the city known as a sanctuary district. And we learn that this facility is designed to separate the unhoused and the unemployed from the rest of society, from the rest of the city. Sisko explains to Bashir that, by the early 2020s, there's a place like this in every major city in the United States. For those of you that didn't know, Sisko is an expert on 21st century history. He loves baseball. He's all about it. It's his big thing. Because I feel like, I guess that's to take a rabbit hole. I feel like no matter what society you're in or how much we advance, there's always going to be those dad hobbies Like, what if the 21st century is the World War II of people hundreds of years from now? I don't know. It's like, it's like you're either going to be smoking meats, care about your lawn, or you're all about World War II. Those are like your dad hobbies. Sorry, we'll get back on to it. So Cisco realizes, and he looks at the date. He's like, oh my gosh, like this is a big significant date. He's like, August 30th, 2024. This is a boiling point in American history. And he calls it one of the most violent disturbances in our nation's history. Cisco even adds that this uprising will change public opinion about the sanctuaries. They'll be torn down, and the U.S. will finally begin correcting the social problems that it struggled with for hundreds of years. And of course, when Bashir hears this 21st century history lesson, he is shocked and appalled. And he admits he never really educated himself on the period because he finds it too depressing, which I don't blame him. Like, a lot of people shy away from depressing events in history. So I really think the writers were using Julian as kind of another allegory of, or even a proxy, you could say, of the viewers of our own discomfort addressing the issue that we have today. So maybe that's it. As my old AP English teacher once said, sometimes the blue curtains are just blue. And that may just be it. There's nothing else to them. However, this discomfort that Julian has was a key inspiration for the episode writers, who believed that the mid-90s America was not addressing its challenges with the unhoused and the homeless population. Behind the scenes DVD feature, the showrunner, the famous showrunner, Ira Stephen Burr, recalls that he actually made a visit to Santa Monica that inspired these episodes. He said it was a beautiful day, and he just noticed that there were just homeless people everywhere, and how tourists were just walking by these homeless people as if they were part of the scenery. And so he took this idea to the extreme, and him and co-writer Robert Wolf imagined a near future what that might look like. What if homelessness is just completely fully ignored? What if it's completely never addressed, never solved, and we'll just wall these people off? And the idea of the sanctuary districts were born. From my knowledge, from what I can see, that's been the attitude of specific states and specific local governments that I could see on how they addressed homeless populations in the 90s. In the most truest sense, the sanctuary districts were a means to simply remove homeless people from public view. And even in San Francisco, for example, when in the 90s, when Art Agnos was mayor, there was a group of homeless people that were actually set up unsanctioned camps outside City Hall, and it was referred to as Camp Agnos, and he brought in the police and got rid of them. And there's even examples in New York City in the 90s with Rudy Giuliani and how he was removing homeless people from the view of public and just kind of getting them out, moving them to kind of the outskirts of the city so it just wouldn't be a problem. Again, not addressing the key fundamental root causes of homelessness, just pushing them off. So there is a lot of inspiration outside of their Santa Monica visit, or Burr's Santa Monica visit, that could inspire, like, okay, this was a big problem 25, 30 years ago too. And all of this, for my research, is really surprising, because then in the 80s, there was a federal program that provided money, a lot of money, for homeless programs. It was called the Stuart B. McKinley Homeless Assistance Act. Looks like that didn't solve anything. And it kind of, even in today's more modern news, that you see foreign dignitaries come to the U.S., especially even San Francisco, I think, and they just cleaned everybody up and just shipped them off. And they were like, where are they at? And it's like, oh, don't worry, they'll be back in a couple weeks. Again, just removing them out of sight, out of mind. Let's forget about them. That is what past tense is telling us, is like, this is the extreme of that, but it's still relatable today. There's some people who have done recent interviews in the last couple of years who have worked on the episode and say, hey, this is super plausible. Michael Okuda served as the art supervisor on the past tense episodes, and he even says that these sanctuary districts look a lot like the evening headline. And his wife, Denise, who actually was on the art department in DS9 too, agreed. She clearly said, we have failed to address the conditions contributing to homelessness in American cities, and that the number of homeless people and unhoused people have exploded since Past Tense has aired. And you're like, how do you know that? Is that really true? Well, the crack team here at OPP looked it up. So in 1990, the U.S. Census Bureau found that there were well over about 250,000 homeless people across the country. We're going to round up, so 228,000 people. And then in 2023, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development estimated this number has risen roughly to over 650,000 people. It is very difficult to get accurate figures on homeless populations because in the 90s, they didn't really do a good job of tracking, and it's tough. So you kind of have to view the 90s figures with a grain of salt because it's really difficult to track. However, that there has been a negative trend, and it could be driven by policies and a bunch of different things. But that's, again, I'm just an accountant. I'm into finance. I really don't understand these issues. I'm just saying it's gotten worse. And anybody, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, can agree with that. Hey, this has not gotten better. And we don't need to hide the problem. We need to address it. And hopefully that's some of the rhetoric we see going on today. And I know sometimes we complain about seeing people living on the street, and then rather complaining about the issues, we make it possible for them to have shelter. And that's the exact attitude that's reflected in these Past Tense episodes. There's also this crazy secondary plot too involving San Francisco's high society and with Dax. So when the subject matter of these sanctuary districts comes up at this exclusive party, one attendee is oblivious to existence, and he's like, I thought they stopped doing that. And it's like, why would they? Another party goer responds, it's the only way to keep the people off the streets. All in all, the sanctuary districts have not come true. That prediction has failed. However, it's still relatable. We still have that issue, and it's only gotten worse since the 90s. There's a couple of examples here, like for instance, in New Mexico, there's a designated area known as Camp Hope, where homeless people can pitch their tents and access running water and electricity. In San Diego, there's safe sleeping sites opened in conjunction with the city's public camping ban. So the city's like, look, we're going to ban it, but then we're going to have these sanctioned encampments that are safe. And I don't know how they keep them safe. I think it's better than nothing for a lot of people, because nothing is often what the alternative is. But even though these policies are more benevolent than the sanctuary districts in, the vision of 2024, they're still a very temporary solution. And in the Past Tense episodes, long-term change only begins once the situation becomes bad enough to inspire revolt. It's a very grim conclusion, and one that we hopefully can avoid, but one that is keeping with the Star Trek vision, of how difficult the road to a more peaceful future can be. And one thing I have to explain is that Star Trek never promised or promises a utopian tomorrow, an overnight sensation. To me, these episodes warn of what could happen if we continue to make bad choices. However, we're never too far beyond repair. We're never too far beyond to be fixed. Tomorrow can be a better place if we're smart, if we work hard, if we're ethical, compassionate, and inclusive. There's one line of the episode that it's really key to this idea. And it's a scene where Dr. Bashir is talking to this social worker about the situation in the sanctuary districts, and he's telling her, hey, it's not your fault. And she responds, everybody tells themselves that, and nothing ever changes. And I think that's the line that is really central to all these episodes, is that you can't just throw up your hands and say that the system is too big to influence. And that's how we get those kind of circumstances. In our real world, there's a lot of things that we can do to tackle this unhoused homelessness population issue. And I know some of you might be saying, well, Star Trek has never been political. And I said at the top of the episode, and it's like, from the very beginning, it's always been that way. Whether we're talking about Vietnam, talking about race relations, it's always been the forefront of the show. Although the prediction of 2024 in the sanctuary states have proven untrue in a literal sense, the episodes carry an allegorical truth that comments on how the U.S. approaches homelessness and then how we approach the unhoused. And it's a truth that resonates far beyond those borders, speaking to just an unfortunate human nature that we avert our eyes from suffering rather than confront it. And I'm guilty of that. I'm sure a lot of people, everyone listening to this is guilty of that. But for me personally, as a Christian and a follower of Christ, the unhoused and the homeless people are super close to my heart, especially in my local community, because we can't be afraid to view suffering and be in uncomfortable situations. But we have to remember, these are human beings. They have feelings, they have a story, and they have a heart. And whether this podcast and this platform is not really the place to debate specific policies on what can help this pandemic, whether it's better mental health resources, larger money, or donations, or other numerous programs that can be done, as we embark on this 29th, 30th anniversary of these past tense episodes, I think we can address it and look at it in the face and say, let's not sweep it under the rug. Let's not forget about it. And I know this is an election year in the U.S., and again, I'm not talking about it, but it is something that we need to think about. So do your research, register to vote, because I think as all people, whether you're in the United States or not, this is something that we should correct. We have the technology, we have the resources, we should be able to stomp this out. And going back to the Star Trek, like many great works of science fiction, Star Trek continues to survive. Even another date on its timeline passes by, and I hope the World War III one passes by in 2 years, because Lord knows nobody wants that. These DS9 past tense episodes will remain sadly relevant as long as homelessness and inequality exist, no matter what year we're in. And I want to say, as we wrap up this episode, thank you for joining me on this deep dive. And as we navigate the challenges of 2024, let's keep in mind the lessons from this episode about empathy, responsibility, and the power of collective action. So, Luna, let's wrap it up. Thank you all so much for listening. And boy, normally we don't handle a lot of modern day political items or things like that. So let me know what you thought. You can DM me on Instagram or Twitter or wherever, and let me know if you guys like this kind of direction. This is something new we've never done before, speaking on real world issues in real time. But like I mentioned before, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to address this important issue and how relevant it is, even though the original past tense episodes were from 1995. I still am very optimistic about 2024 and the rest of the planet. I think we're at a great time to live in. The access of medicine and the access of healthcare and the advances in technology. It's a great time to be alive in human history. But yeah, we still have challenges and we still have things to overcome, and let's not shy away from that. But either way, thank you all so much for listening. And again, feel free to reach out to us on social media. We're happy to hang out with you guys and talk. Second star to the right, straight on to more.